AV Consultants' imperative is to deliver audiovisual, lighting, ICT, and acoustics in India. Amazing as this might sound, this broad spectrum speciality is unique to Indian Audiovisual Consultancy. Mr. Kelvin King will bring his unique experience in executing museum projects that demand solutions from audiovisual to acoustics and integration. Design implications of museums as well, enlighten the audience of AV professionals on developing a team of talent to deliver holistic solutions from museums spanning audiovisual, lighting, ICT, and acoustics. We have Mr. Kelvin Ashby King on stage. Everyone, please give a round of applause. He has worked in the AV ICT industry for the last 26 years. Kelvin is EAVA certified and is currently up to level 3 CTSD. Mr. Kelvin is also a founding member of the Indian Association of Acoustics. He has been involved in the audiovisual and lighting industry throughout his complete professional career. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Kelvin Ashby King. So I would now like you to begin the session.
Okay, thank you. Putting this together over the last few days, I found that the subject material covering all the disciplines together was going to be at least an 8-hour sitting. So I have condensed this down considerably, and I'm really looking at this for holistic museum design for the AV professional. And we will talk about lighting and how lighting interfaces. And we will also discuss IT networks, etc., as they pertain to the AV. So we'll look at, first of all, defining how museums get classified, what it is to create an experience, how we do that with interactive museums and experience centres, look at how the disciplines interrelate through some case studies, look at the type of team that you would need for this sort of work, and then just take a little bit of a look forward onto how things are in the world beyond the physical and where museum and design is going in India. Now, there are 3 very high-level categories for museums, and I brought this up because even though we work in art museums with lighting, AV and networking and acoustics do not play a big part of this. The second category of museums is an artifact-based museum. This is one which has lots of maybe dioramas, static displays, sculptures and things. Again, lighting, and to a small extent, AV plays a part. But where AV really comes into its own is interactive museums. Now, in each of these, there are a series of subheadings. So you may have a music experience, you may have a science museum, you may have a health museum, all of which are examples of projects that we built in India. So we're going to be looking basically at interactive museums. Like any of our jobs, whether it's a corporate project, whether it is a museum project, there is a very defined process that goes into putting a museum together. And we are only, as our professional side as technologists, we're only a small part of what goes on. There is a lot of work which is done by other disciplines within the museum. So each of our projects starts off with a client brief. The client, and the most important thing to do, is to work with your client and with your partners to get a very clear definition of what you're designing and what the outcome is to be. Without that, you'll find that you've done a lot of work and you end up going back again. I would also just at this stage raise a little bit of a highlight. I have not done a museum project which is completed in less than 3 years. Okay? These you need to take a long-term view with. We've had museum projects go from 2.5, 3 years out to 11 years from when they were conceptualized to when they were actually finished. And this is for many reasons, lack of money, various other things which affect the projects moving forward, but they are long-term projects. So the first thing is establish the client brief, and we'll go through a client brief. We'll look at the second part is establishing the content. Now, my company is a technology company. We don't do content. So we partner with other companies who are specialized in exhibit design and content development and research. And then we form a team of which we go forward to the client. And then from that position, we have a defined client brief. We know what the content is, and then we can start developing the communication language that the museum has to do. Having been involved with a lot of corporate museums or corporate experiences or experience centres and museums, we need a washing line to hang the washing on. So we've got to first of all develop a storyline, a theme, or a natural progression through a museum. And we're going to look at some case studies a little bit later on. So I'm just going to take you through a content brief that was, and through the design development of a particular project. This is one that was developed by Tata Alexi as the content and exhibit design. And this is for a new museum in Tirupati. The first thing that we did was the research and benchmarking. Now again, I don't get involved in that. I leave that to the other team to do. But they really look at other museums in India. You can see up in the first slide in the top left-hand corner, the Khalsa Heritage Museum, which is one of our projects, and IME. Those have been used as benchmarks for the newer projects. From the benchmarking and research, we look at how we're going to start the visual design. And this is where we start to get involved with the various other members of the team in developing a look and feel. That look and feel starts with the graphic panels, and it runs right the way through into how we're going to interpret and light the museum, and how we're going to blend technology into that museum, so that we have one thing that has the same look, the same feel, and feels like a natural flow. For me, the most important thing is that the lighting and the AV should not stick out as an add-on. It must be part of the overall experience. And often we find ourselves telling our partners or our clients that technology is not necessarily the right thing to be putting everywhere. It's a natural reaction to say, yes, we can do that with a video wall. Yes, we can do that with an LED wall. But actually, the technology must enhance how the communication happens. It's funny sitting down talking. I'm used to waving my arms around you. Excuse me. So here you can see the visual design research was done, and there was a thematic design developed for how we were going to communicate within the museum. And then we started looking at the technology solutions, whether that was touch tables, whether it was interactive projections, 3D projection mapping. I'll take you through a series of different technologies a little bit later on. But we took references, we worked it into the content, the flow, and how we wanted the visitor to experience. Often you'll see in these projects that the first thing we start with is a video telling people how to behave. So in the pre-holding areas, we will put up a video on some form of display which says this is how you should behave in this museum environment. Then we'll go on and then we will create an orientation which will then position people in the right mindset to take in the information. The other thing which I'll add in right now is that when we design museums, we typically layer content. So you can't put up you can't expect people to read a book in a museum. But we always provide a way for people to be able to drill down at least 1 to 2 layers for additional information. The other part of creating an interactive museum is that we're also able to engage with people through their emotions as well. So a lot of what we're doing in that museum is actually, is that changing by itself? I wasn't on that slide. Okay, anyhow, we're engaging with people to create an emotion, because emotions are actually remembered better and tie knowledge to emotion, which enables retention of information. Then the design approach is decided. Okay, and here you can see some examples of how we're doing design approach. So we've got a look and feel, and then we look at the branding. What is the colour palette going to be for the building? What will the secondary colour palette be? How will we colour code and use colour in the museum experiences? And then develop a brand identity. This brand identity is actually a very, very important element. It is, if you remember in Pune there's a Darshan Museum. Once you've seen that logo, you will always remember what that means. When you see it again, it will trigger. And then we've looked at how the various things are to be applied graphically. Now I keep saying we're involved on the edge of a lot of these tasks. We're not directly involved except for assisting with helping to develop a lighting concept which will run alongside the graphic concept. What needs to be highlighted, what is primary, what is secondary, and how that's going to go. Is it going to be an experience that is usher-driven? Is it going to be an experience which is self-driven? And how does that unroll and continue to involve the client and the client's particular map of people that they wish to attend? And then we start looking at information display panels, both electronic and non-electronic. And then signage. So again, digital signage plays a lot of part. One of the things which we'll talk about a little later is that mobile applications, whether that is just a straight mapping application or whether it is a augmented reality concept, these are becoming very, very popular in Indian museums, mostly because a lot of what we've got as artifacts is not fully complete. About 8 years ago, we worked on a very, very large project in the south of India at Hampi. Unfortunately, the government changed as it was about to be implemented, so it never got done. But that was a virtual reality project to enable you to recreate the temples from the ruins that you were viewing. The mock-ups and prototypes came out amazingly, but unfortunately the money was never there to take it forward. So again, they've looked at the flow, and we've been part of this. How long will it take someone to go through? A particular museum we're working on in Pune at the moment, once we had finished the content, it was a 9.5-hour visit. Rashi, my colleague and my business partner here, will tell you that it took us 4 years to get the client to cut down the content to only be 2 hours in one section and another hour in the second section. So again, I'm not going to dawdle on these slides because these are a bit in depth for what we're looking at. But you can see how the treatments were starting to evolve, how the museum was being planned out, even before we have done major design development or drawings. So it's been visually charted. Now this is a concept design. By the time we're getting to this stage, we're actually entering the concept design, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail to looking at what we're doing. Here you can see that we're starting to integrate the lighting design ideas into the presentation. I'll just quickly slip through these. Because it's a bit repetition. There are 3 floors to this museum. So I just wanted to give you some idea of what you have done before you even actually take the pencil to the paper. You've come up with very clear concepts, movement plans, timing, and then you can start to put together your design for what you're going to do. So this is looking at conceptually the final overview of what we were doing. Then comes the detailed design. Then comes the time where we've got to start taking lots of decisions about how the museum comes together. First of all, how are we going to control the user experience? From that, it extends out to how do we control our AV equipment? How do we control the lighting when we want it to interact as the visitor passes through? All of these things now start to come up in the first layer of design decisions you're taking. And as you can see, we're slowly moving our way through the chart. Again, unfortunately, there is not a time to go into absolute depth, and I want to save time at the end for questions. But typically, we will decide the type of control system at the beginning. Typically, we will use a real-time code-based control system. We tend not to use products like Kramer or Crestron for control because they're not working on time code. So to have 2 things occur exactly at the same time, repeatable time and time again, we cannot rely on a harmonic-driven clock inside the computer. We actually have to use a time generator. And this is very important for keeping all of your video in sync. If you're using headphones and you're transmitting audio over GSM or IR, you must keep it in sync. So then the audio must start at exactly the same time as the video. So in general, we take a decision on the type of control system. And again, we're not saying we're going to select this brand or this particular system, but we know we're going to use a connected time control system for all event management through the museum. From then, we'll start developing the individual exhibit concepts. And we're taking what has been decided at the beginning, we're looking at the content, and we're then bringing that back around to say, how do we tell that story the best way? Now, this has been discussed, and I will touch on this in quite a bit of detail during the case studies, because I can tell you why we took that choice. Otherwise, I'm talking a bit ethereally at the moment. So we detail up each gallery with the type of display, the type of audio, whether it is a narrow beam ultrasonic speaker for 2 people or whether it is general audio for the whole event area. And we will detail up the network. Now, up until recently, networks have not been something we've been particularly worried about in museums. But now all of our video is transferring across the network, and all of our audio is transferring across the network, and all of our control is there. So the network, and having someone that can handle high levels of 2K and 4K video content in a network as part of your team becomes a very, very important thing to start considering. Because whether it is a normal job or whether it is a corporate job or whether it's an auditorium, this now starts to play a very big factor in how you're putting your system together. Networks reduce cost, networks increase complexity, but there is no cabling, which is one thing we're all very pleased with. Yep. It's a godsend, but it also can be a trap to fall into if you have not planned it out and managed your bandwidth and network consumption correctly. A lot of the vendors will tell you it's easy, just stick this box here and that box there. When you've got 120 of those boxes competing on the network for the same bandwidth, you know that you're beginning to get in trouble. Okay? And then it becomes a very expensive deal to start changing your switches, upgrading your throughput. That starts to go into crows. Believe me, I'm dealing with it on someone else's project at the moment. So we start putting together the detailed designs. So up in the right-hand corner, you'll see that this is a Gandhi museum, which is currently being installed in Jaipur. And I'm looking to you, Rashi, to prompt me when I forget. In Jaipur, and this is an edge-to-edge blended projection. Okay? I won't tell you what... We have a terrible habit in my company of... What's it actually called, Rashi? This exhibit is to... We call it the Gandhi Strip Show, but basically this exhibit shows how Gandhi went from being a suited lawyer to a dhoti guru. Yep. And that progressively happens through the semicircle of the show. So you can see that we've started to detail up projector locations, we've detailed up power requirements, and we're starting to move into a detailed design phase when we can start to put together a BOQ. Now, this seems to be following the track of a corporate museum. Sorry, the track of a corporate project. You do a meeting room, you put together a BOQ, you check that you've got all your connectivity. But it's a little bit more than that, because we have layers of content, we have layers of timing, and we have layers of experience which you're not doing in a boardroom or an auditorium. The sound system has to work, yes, but it also has to work at the right time and generate the right environment and generate the experience for you. This, again, fitting the schematics on is very hard, but this is a network-driven audio schematic. We're using Dante to transport the audio from, in this particular project, it's a 4 lakh square foot floor plate. We have 3 control rooms which are linked together, and we're using Dante to take our content out and deliver it to the various remote amplifiers. So it's a distributed amplifier system, because each exhibit has its own amplification channels. In one area, I may have 6 channels of audio. So we've remoted the amplifiers out into those locations in this particular project. And again, in a museum, you're not using large amplifiers. You're looking to use 20, 30, 40 watt, very small block amplifiers, but locate them close to the source. So then we've started to lay out the lighting design as well. As you can see here, I'm not sure how clear it is, but lighting positions are put in. The methodology of control, whether it is going to be DMX or whether it's going to be DALI, is already decided. Typically we'll use DALI control, and when we have to do RGB or very special effects, we'll switch over to DMX, and we use a DALI controller that works on a DMX controller that works on the DALI system. One of the things that we have to do for audio and video is start to develop data sheets. It's not something we'd ever do in a corporate building. But here we have to communicate to a graphic house, maybe in another part of the country, maybe someone that we're never going to meet, what we're expecting them to do with the content that I'm going to play back. What resolution does it have to be? How is the image mapping being done? What sort of projection is it going on? What sort of color balance is needed in the environment? All of that we put into a single docket or sheet that we give with the tender, so that the content providers know in advance what our requirements are and what we need to do. Now again, a word of warning that a lot of the content people will take up project work they've never done before. So I currently have a contractor that says, yes, I can do dome projections. Well, a year and a half later, we still don't have the storyboard, let alone the content which is needed in 4 months. So you need to make sure also when you start dealing with those sort of vendors that you have people on board that know what they're actually doing. The rest of it, vendor appointment, fit out, are exactly the same as a normal AV IT lighting job. But don't forget that you need to do programming. You've had all these ideas, you've got all this content, we have to put it into a coherent, inverted commas, show. Programming always is the last thing that we get to done. Like AV and any corporate project, in a museum, we're also the last people that get to put our equipment in, put things on the wall and get them going. We're lucky if the network's running because someone else is providing that. And if we have stable power, that's a miracle as well. The 4 weeks we had planned for programming and the 2 weeks that we had planned to run the show again and again and again to look for the bugs in it where it doesn't work, what button that usher girl is going to press in the wrong sequence, and the whole museum shuts down, and that has happened. Okay, suddenly we've gone from 6 weeks to 2 weeks. I cannot stress, based on experience and everything, the way that we approach the design, the way we approach the documentation is actually driven by the experiences that we've had in getting it wrong. And over 30 years, we've got a system which we're still filling holes because new things are coming in, but most of them we've got filled now. In our practice, we are very different than normal AV companies or AV consultants because we're working in acoustics, audiovisual, ICT and lighting. So when we do take up a project, this gives us a certain advantage that those 4 fields, which are very heavily related to each other, are being handled by one consultant or one team within my office handles the 4 disciplines. This is part of our DNA, and this intertwined set of skills allows us to create, integrate and deliver experiences. Now I'm going to run you through some videos. I honestly didn't have time to edit out all the marketing rubbish, but I will. I'm not sure whether this control will allow me to stop or start, but I will talk over the video. So if you could actually pull the noise level down because nobody wants to listen to the fancy music under the video, and I can talk over it. So we want to run through some of the projects that we've done over the years and talk about why we deployed technology, what that technology was, what the advantages were, and why we've taken particular... Can you just turn the music volume down, please? Now, I wanted to show an experience showcase because this is one of the earliest showcases done back in 2000 for Infosys. It was the first of the corporate showcases, and this is long before we started redeveloping museums. So if you can cast your mind back to 2000, we'd just gone through the millennium and the lifts were still working and electronics continued to function. So this was the first ever customer experience. Infosys spent $1 million, which was unheard of in those days, to bring a design company in from Europe and employed us to come up with a very simple customer experience. And it involved telling a story of Infosys in the days where they were the after-hours workforce. Now, I have this disclaimer here because I've had several companies. Some of these were done in my older companies. Oh. We've skipped Infosys and gone to Tulsa, have we? I'd like to, if we can, because I need to set... No, okay, fine. Just pause the video for a moment. So conceptually, we needed to tell a story about software. And the biggest thing is, we can't see software. We had to tell a story of what Infosys was doing. So the company from the UK, Joseph and Associates, they came up with the idea of using a metaphor, a story, to tell what Infosys did. And it was quite odd because you came to a door. The door was with the touch glass. It had just come in the market, LCD glass. And there was a very simple screen on the wall showing you some technology images. And then the door dissolves, the door automatically opens, and you walk through a very expensive showcase full of old computers, hardware, and various things, and also the latest modern equipment. All of that to set a tone for what was going to come later. These are some, I'm in front of the video. So this is the entry. This is the branding and a little bit of a discussion on what people are going to see. Then you go inside, pass through the artifacts, which are in a big glass arch over the top, and proceed on to a backlit projection with four hanging rear projected images in the center. So this is then 5 rear projected images. This, of course, back in 2000, no one had seen any of this before. So we were projecting the background and we were projecting the foreground. And we told the story of how software plays in the person's life. From then you moved on to a pin model. I don't know if you've seen those executive toys where you put it against the side of your face with all the little pins in it and your image of your face is there. This was the same time, showing the development of Infosys' campus, and then it went on to talk about Infosys and the fact that they were global in the real world and what they could deliver. Now, it's a very, very simple storyline, but in those days it was a very, very powerful statement. Mohandas Pai said to me, I said, well, we spent on your conference facilities on the ground floor $1 million. He said, yes, but that earned us $200 million because even our clients in those days were not having experience centres like that. For us, that was really great because we went on to do Wipro, we went on to do TCS, we went on to do Satyam, which ended up winning the worldwide prize for 2004 for exhibition, corporate exhibition spaces. And it started to set a tone, and Infosys certainly set the tone for everybody else. Very simple technologies. A very old dot matrix LED wall to show the finance on because we could change it. Sorry about the quality of that video. The later ones are better, I think, I hope. I'm just waiting, I can't remember which one. Now we're on to the Kelsey Heritage. This museum started development in 1999. It finished in 2011. We had 2 changes of government. We ran out of money 4 times, or the government did. Yeah, this is better quality, great. But this is a superb museum. The problem with this museum was we had 500 years of Sikh history to tell the story of 500 years of Sikh history. And we had a few swords and a couple of horse hooves, and there wasn't much left. So this became a truly inspirational museum. It had also been designed to be an artifact museum and not an interactive museum. It was designed by Moshe Sapti, who's a very well-known international architect. And we needed to... Can you just pause the video for a moment, please? Can I pause? I can't pause, yeah? We had a very large space with a mirrored ceiling, It was 3.5 stories high, and a water on the floor, and then a big bridge that came from the lowest level of the museum and climbed up 3 stories to the highest level of the museum. We needed to set an idea of what this museum was about. How do we take you from whatever the date was to partition and explain to you 500 years of Sikh history? The idea came from a song that was talking about the day and the year and the seasons of the Punjab. And that song became the idea of a miniature painting that showed all the elements of the Punjab. This became an 80-metre long by 40-metre high miniature painting in 12 layers. So this idea was then stretched out. Then we decided to overlay gobos and special effects. We built in Diwali, we built in Lodi, we had kites flying all around the place, visually using lighting to generate imagery of kites across the mural and paintings. But for Diwali, the lighting was all embedded completely in the fiberglass panels that made up the 12 layers. So we were able to create a show and experience that ran in a loop. So you would do 1 day, 1 year in the cycle of the life within the Punjab. And it was such on a massive scale, it became an extremely defining moment for this museum. It really made the rest of it a lot of hard work. By the way, this museum gets 25,000 people a day during festival season. Okay? Again, that's a problem we only have in India, that the numbers of people, the Tirupati Museum is expecting 5,000 to 10,000 people per day through the museum. So your systems have to be strong, robust. Yep. So we then go through a series of galleries that talk about the 10 gurus, 9 gurus, 10 gurus. Each one of these galleries symbolizes one of the gurus, and various effects are used. Again, this was not a heavy technology museum. It was an effects museum. It was an interactive museum, but it wasn't heavy technology because the budgets weren't there. There is a new museum coming up in Gujarat. I can't say the name, but the budget for that museum is 100 crores of AV. Just AV. That is a quarter of the turnover of one of the largest AV companies in the country. Yep. Just one project. So you can see how far we've shifted. So we go through 5 galleries which tell the story of the gurus. We then go outside, we get the story of Guru Tegh Bahadur, excuse me, I'm very bad, which was apparently staked out in the ground to die in the desert. You can start the video again, thanks. So a lot of lighting effects, a lot of 3D layering, and very selective implementation of video. We used stage techniques. We created optical illusions to make it look like you were looking down a stepwell. We ran video at the bottom on the mirrors from behind. So you would see people, but it was like looking down. We built a simulation of the Golden Temple. This is the installation which talks about that particular guru's death. The formation of the Golden Temple and the Sikh Wars. Again, lots of use of audio, minimal use of video because video was too expensive. With this museum, surprisingly, this one here is very interesting because this is a whole series of moving screens. I understand, I haven't been there for a while, but I understand it is actually still working. It's had a few hiccups on the way, but we were using technology which didn't exist. How do you move a screen forward and keep it in focus before there was mapping software? So we wrote our own software and we had it adjust the minor motors because we could just shift backwards and forwards. So it was a lot of things that were done to create an experience. Yep. I took the decision after being 11 years to do the first phase that I'd be dead before the second phase was done. The second phase was done in 5 years, but we weren't involved in the second phase. This is going to take us through to newer types of museums, and I'm just trying to remember which one I did next. This is a lovely little museum which got set up in Pune for Sadhu Vaswani. This museum is in pristine condition. It's been extremely well maintained. It looks exactly like and operates like the day we set it up. I think 14 years ago now, 12, 13 years ago. It's in a very confined space, and as a lighting designer, I really hate it when my photos come back showing lights not working. But every time we photograph them, we find one or two lights not working. So here we used the idea of a cinematic journey through the life of the guru. So we had a living guru who was the current Dada Vaswani, this gentleman. His guru was Sadhu Vaswani before him. And they wanted to tell all of the stories from his life, which are basically the teachings of the museum. Here we used a lot of techniques, combining video techniques with theatrical techniques. So again, you can put things together, you can blend ideas together. I'll just show you what that means. Sorry, this is the slow bit. This is the marketing bit. Our first experience, we took them into a house in Sindh, and it was a 2-story house with painted house on the lower level and projection on the upper level when it gets there. I'm just watching the clock because it's giving me a certain amount of time. So we had a full movie that showed itself on the upper level of the gallery. This gallery sits 15 people. But then we used on the lower levels to tell the story of him giving to a beggar food from his own table, and another instance with his mother when he was sick. And we used a Victorian theatre technique of a gauze screen. And when you light something on the front, you can't see through. When you light the back, and we used a video wall, LCD screen, to create the experience with outside the door with the beggar. So again, wrapping this all around someone, bringing them into it, and making them part of it. Yep. So again, this is the second incident. And then we go back to the boy on the roof and so on. I can't skip it forward. The team I was working for on this project were from NID. Originally, the senior designers were. And they got together with some of their friends, and they made the first silicon-based realistic mannequins manufactured in India. Company called Dirty Hands in Bangalore. And these are absolutely amazing. Better quality than Madame Tussauds. Yep. I'll just let this go on a little bit because there is one thing that I want to show you here. But again, we have an audio track. We have interactive lighting, which is changing with the audio that is proceeding with this. And it allows people to get up close. There are no guardrails in here. Everybody tells me, no, we can't do that in India. People will pull the silicon off the models. It just does not happen. Even in Khalsa Heritage, where we have 25,000 people a day going through. They do not damage the museum. That's another part of Indian training, learning, whatever we want to call it, that you give respect. And everybody says that they won't, but actually we've seen it time and time again. This next coming up was the first holographic visual that was done. Now, it was very expensive to do. The screen alone cost $30,000. But we wanted it there because we wanted to create a very important wow at this point in the story. So it became a very pivotal point to understand the development. So we used a very strong technique to deliver the message, which is the next one after this. Sadhu Vaswani's friends found him to be very prim and proper, so they decided at 22 years old to take him to a house of ill repute. They introduced him to a lady there. This is the holographic projection. If you look closely, you can see through his legs. When you don't use a camera, you can't. But this video runs for 2.5 minutes, and it tells very clearly the power of this young man because he converted the prostitute. So this was chosen not because we wanted to spend money, but it was at this point, like any good movie you go see. You go see RRR, you get taken up and then they drop you down, and then they take you up and you drop them down again. We're doing that with museum content. We're keeping people going and moving through the experience. I'm going to skip the rest of this video if you can help me. There are wave machines and more dioramas, a full-scale bush event. This is a Victorian wave machine with mechanical models. Could you stop this and just skip? Oh, I can do it, can I? This one you need some video for, please. Audio.
Music is everything. Did you know that Bengaluru is home to a music museum, and that too an interactive music museum?
One of the things is that museums are not just government anymore. There are more and more museums which are coming up which are privately funded. Of the 7 projects we have in museums at the moment, 3 of them are privately funded. The rest are government.
3 main sections: a state-of-the-art interactive exhibit area, a sound garden, and a learning center.
The sound garden is basically to introduce people to the principles of sound before entering the main music museum. So it's more to do with the sound made up of natural things. The sound garden is made up of wood, stone, metals, brass, aluminium, and we have a humming stone where when you put your head inside and you hum or you say Omkar, you have a vibration, you have a resonance throughout your body.
Beautifully lit museum
Here
also
we've used all
houses a
sorts of
rooftop
different
amphitheater
techniques.
and a small
This
recording
is a
studio
chakra,
where you can record
and it's
your voice
projected
recordings.
down onto the roof in the zone which it's relevant to. Here, video is and we wanted to create a street scene. So we embedded the videos in there and we lit the area and we added background noise to create the ambience of a Bangalore street scene. But allowing speakers inside the rickshaw to, you can watch the concert or hear what's being exposed. Here we also had to deal with films, but we added things like a recording studio. So you can go into a booth, you can record yourself, and then you take home a CD of yourself singing to a background track. All these things are real-time videos, lots of interactives, touch tables. Okay. Okay, there are a couple more. I've just run out of time, but there are a couple of other videos. I'm happy to share this presentation if you drop me an email. You can find me at clarity-consult.com, sorry. There is one more video, but we're not going to get through that because I have 21 seconds left. I just wanted to open it up for any very quick questions. which one do you think's next? I had the Mahatma Mandir Museum, and again I'll briefly discuss a couple of things here. One of those is that, you know, you don't need to put LED screens up straight. You can put them at an angle. If you've got a story to tell, which is what happened leading up to the riots before Gandhi was shot and through partition, how do you create that? How do you communicate an idea of chaos? So to do this, we tilted all the screens. We played back on one wall the content on tilted screens, which was the actual violence and chaos going on during that phase. It was a totally black gallery. On the other wall, we put up straight screens showing a mosaic of video on what the government was selling in those times. And at the end of that sequence, a gunshot goes off and the room's plunged into darkness. Now, these sort of things are how you can take lighting, the technology, the emotion and the idea, blend them together and use them to cross-support each other. Here in this museum, we use projection mapping, we use various other techniques. So a couple of final things. On-site supervision is a must. Do not try and build a museum unless you're there all the time. You can't do it. Correct planning and sequencing of the project, as I mentioned before, is the power going to be on, is the AC on, and so on through these particular points. And I'll skip the rest of this, but I think it's fairly obvious what's happening going forward in museums. Right now, there are over actually 30 plus museums actually physically being fitted out, and there are 100 more in the pipeline coming over the next 14, 18 months. They're both in the government and private sector, and the work encompasses all factors of AV and lighting. This sudden development of museums and entertainment is actually part of a country's developmental cycle, and is an indication that the country is maturing. And it is a very specialised market. It's very niche. If you can find a way into that market, you have the skill sets, then you're not competing at extremely low margins and trying to compete against 4 other people. Okay, thank you everybody. Sorry for the technical glitches. The AV person had a problem.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session. I would like to ask Mr. Anil Chopra, sir, to come up on stage and present a small token of appreciation for Mr. Kelvin Ashby King. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. Kelvin Ashby King.
I need to say a few words that, apart from the fact, very evidently in the last 1 hour, you have learned from a master and you have learned from a guru of AV design. And I'm so proud that on our platform, Kelvin has shared all his design ideas, design implementation of his design, and all the factors that come into a fantastic AV design. And it's wonderful of him to share such a detailed and so much information about AV design as his company, and he has done all these years. We must all thank him for that. And a big round of applause for Kelvin first. And I must say that He has supported the AV-ICN platform and given me a lot of encouragement in the last 1-2 years to not fall short of any motivation in building this platform as a AV neutral, independent AV platform for the AV industry in India. So, and when it comes from somebody who is a renowned figure in the AV industry and a figure of repute and recognition, that is the kind of motivation that gives you strength. So I owe him thanks for that. And also, he was about to leave the country for some work with his son, but he cancelled everything to be here. And that shows his level of support for the AV-ICN platform. And for that, once more, please, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kelvin.